Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural Catapult Advisor Group DeSimone Deals, the Exit Strategy podcast. And for our very first guest on this podcast is Alan Bennett. He's a colleague of mine with the Focal Point Coaching International. He's also part of an elite exit planning group called the Value and Transition Advisors Group. And that's where most of my interaction with Alan. We collaborate a lot on exit planning. And really, why I wanted to bring him on this podcast is because this podcast is all about helping business owners get their business ready for sale, help have more seamless transitions, and get rid of all the things that a lot of business owners who don't have any help mess up or screw up. So without further ado, I really want to introduce you to Alan Bennett. Alan, why don't you give us a quick overview in like about a minute of who you are and what you do?
Okay, you're given a high 1 minute time frame, Greg. That's dangerous.
Well, if you want to, I'll give you two.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So my background, I spent 20 years. I spent 10 years in corporate America and realized that I'm a small business owner guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I just had that entrepreneur mindset. So it took me about 10 years to figure out what I wanted to do. The next phase of my business was I opened my own business. It was a meat market and catering business, and I ran that for 20 years. The retail side of things, after year 8, I closed and I should have sold it. It was a sellable business that I didn't realize what a sellable business was. So I closed a sellable business. I continued to run the catering side for another 12 years, and I sold it the wrong way. And I did an owner finance, and we had contracts with schools, camps, just private schools and camps. So it was all kid related. It was contract catering. And I decided to sell it in December of 19. And I did owner finance. COVID hit, right? We were completely, I sold it to my chef. He'd been my chef for 14 years. So I sold it to a reliable person, and I knew what the business would do. And COVID put him in the ground. It just was over. And so I exited 2 businesses exactly the wrong way. And I was so pissed at the whole situation that I started looking for ways. How could I have avoided this? Where did I go wrong? And that's when somebody said, well, did you not have a business coach? And I'm like, what's a business coach? So no, I did not. And as I got into business coaching and understand how they help small business owners improve their business, I then found out about exit planning, which is something I gravely needed. So the reason I worked my way into exit planning was because some of the mistakes that I made, and I promised I would never do it, nor would I allow anybody I'm in contact with to suffer the way I did and learn the hard way like I did. So that's how I got to where I am.
That's interesting. Like, I think a lot of people that we deal with in our group is they have their personal experiences, and it molds how they want to help their clients, how they want to serve their clients. So if you look back, so you said you had a business that was sellable and you didn't know it.
Yeah.
What happened after the fact that made you reevaluate? Hey, I handled that exit on the first business wrong. Like, what were the key factors that made you rethink that whole process?
Well, first of all, it was profitable. So both the catering side and the retail side, they were operating in the same space. And what happened was on the catering had more profit. And so I was battling my chef, all my cooks' time, and the kitchen space was limited. I couldn't grow. It was in a retail center. So I couldn't physically get any bigger. I couldn't redo anything. And so the profits were more in one part than they were in the other part. What I did was I said, well, I'll just remove the retail side. I'll remove this part of it. Therefore, the more profitable side can grow. To me, it was an easy choice. I didn't lose any money out of it. I just wasn't able to sell. And once I learned going through exit planning process, as far as the education part of it as a business coach, once I joined Focal Point and I started getting into Value Builder and the CEPA, that's when I realized, I'm like, holy cow. So I found out about 13 or 14 years later that was a sellable business. For 13 or 14 years, I was ignorant of that. I did not realize that I closed a sellable business. So I
So
don't know if I answered your
you
question.
did. So using that experience, like so you went into Focal Point, you got your CEPA, which is a certified exit planning advisor through
Mhm.
the organization called EPI, Exit Planning Institute. What did you learn through that from Focal Point and through the CEPA certification process that you would have applied to your business and you actually now applied to your current customers and clients?
Um, Without it sounding harsh, ignorance was the big thing that I ran into. Is just I didn't know what I didn't know. And as I went through the process of being educated on what are the drivers of a successful business, what are the things that make it more valuable, I never thought like that. I never had that. I was just doing. We were cooking. We were cutting meat. We were cooking, and it was all about production. I had the production mindset, and I had a revenue and growth profit mindset, and that's all I thought about. That was the only thing I thought about. How are we going to grow? How much money are we making? And who's doing the work? That's it. That was it. To me, there was nothing else to even think about.
So that's interesting because if I talk to clients, the three things you are addressing contribute to value. So what do you think the missing step was saying, okay, you're growing, you will make sure you're the right people, you're making sure you're profitable. What was the missing step to say, okay, how do I convert doing the right things to run a business to creating a transferable business that has value that you could get separately from running it?
Yeah, I didn't know anybody that knew those things. I had bankers, attorneys, CPAs. It may have been the same. And matter of fact, he's still my CPA. For years, I had all of these professionals that handle business transactions. That's what they do for a living. CPAs, they handle business accounts on tax returns. So I had guidance in the lane that they live in, but there was nobody that I came across or heard about that knew how to drive value of a business. I didn't even know those folks. And I was so busy in the weeds of my business that I didn't get on LinkedIn. I didn't take the time to do research because I didn't know I needed to do the research. So for me, I hope I'm answering your question. I didn't know that I needed to look, and I didn't know where to even start if I was told.
So if you had to go back now, knowing what you now know through your certification with both Focal Point and with your CEPA, what are the two or three things that you would do differently now that you just knowing that hey, I'm focusing on not just running this business to be profitable, but to actually package up to maximize value and to transfer it to someone else. What are the top three things that you would do differently now in hindsight?
Manage my time better.
How
That
so?
so yeah. I was production focused, revenue focused, profit focused. It was get it done, get it sold, and make sure you sell it at the right price. And to me, that's all business was. Minimizing cost, right? Which is where all that is. That falls under the umbrella of profit. I would go back and block time to have, if I knew that there was an advisor out there that could help me, a business coach out there that could help me, I would hire them for one. Or I would just block time to think more like an entrepreneur and less like a production guy.
What would that look like if you were your go back in time and you could be the Alan Bennett of today versus the Alan Bennett of yesteryear?
Yeah. Instead of working 6 or 7 days a week, I would cut that back. I think that's where I would find my time. The business I did, I loved my business. That's probably why I worked so much, is I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed what I did. I love to cook, love to eat, but so it was an easy thing. And people would say you're good at it and you get pats on the back. Um, I was on the local TV once a month for 18 years. So I was like this local celebrity. So you get all these accolades, which was right up my alley. And so I've never had the thought that there's anything I should have changed. So if I would change anything, I would either find a way to read more books on, business knowledge or the how to operate business. I would take the time to read. I would take the time to listen to, I don't know if they even had podcasts back then. They might have, but I don't know. I was too busy working. But I would take the time to self-educate.
You mentioned you had a second um, business when you split them apart. You closed one down, you kept running the other one, and you said that didn't go exactly how you wanted either. What would you have done? What was the outcome that you thought you could have got versus what you did get? You don't have to give numbers and all that stuff, just
Yeah.
general impressions of what happened.
Yeah. So my chef at the time, we had 7 private schools that we were contracted with and 2 camps. And I had a chef who was basically the general manager over all of it. So each facility had its own kitchen. Well, most of them did. And we had delivery vans that would transport food back and forth. He ran everything. I bet I worked 20, maybe 25 hours a week, which was a dream. So I had this one guy that's running everything. So my business was not that owner dependent at that time, and he was taking care of everything. And he was a single dad, had a daughter, and he wanted the business, but he didn't have any money. So I said, I tell you what, we've got all these contracts, which we did. They were solid contracts. The shortest contract was 2 years, and the longest contract was 5. So we had contract sales with these organizations that have been there forever. I had a guy that'd been with me 14 years. He knew how everything worked. He was running it anyway. And I thought I would do him a favor by owner financing. He didn't put any money down, and it was just over time, you just pay me a percent. And we had a history of what the profits were. And so I just took just enough to where it made it worth my while to sell the business. And he just paid me off of revenue.
So you did the kind of like the owner finance is more of like a royalty on sales, like you got
Yeah.
extra on sales.
Yep. Yep. So he would pay me, and over time, his percent ownership would go up. And we had it on a 12-year payout. And it was amount that he could live with because it didn't affect his paycheck. He still left himself on the payroll. It was the business profits is where I was taken from the business profits.
Okay.
And it was a 12-year payout. And it made perfect sense. We had, oh gosh, some of those places we'd have been in there for 15 or 16 years. So it wasn't like we were new into any of them. And to me, it was a no-brainer. We've had these contracts. There's no chance of anybody knocking us out. We've done a good job. We're solid. So everything made sense of why I would owner finance. And it was secure in my mind until COVID. And that shut everything down. All the schools were shut down, no food service, nothing.
So obviously COVID's like I want to say it's a once in a lifetime event because the last time we had a pandemic like that was in I think 1918. But there's consistently stuff that happens. Like we've had 9/11, we've had the tech bubble, we've had the financial crisis. So it seems like every 10 years or so, something big happens to affect the economy. So this is, I think, good word of warning for a lot of folks. But now that you saw what happened with COVID, which means the worst thing that could happen can happen. You never think the worst thing that can happen, but
Yeah.
it does.
It does.
Every decade or so, something big happens. In hindsight, knowing that you would still want to transfer, I'm assuming you still would have wanted to transfer that business.
Yeah.
How would you have done it differently to protect yourself against something like that calamitous, or even just everyday risks?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would do is I would encourage him, and I would seek out SBA lending assistance
Mhm.
because we did not do that. And I would strongly recommend finding lending available. Um, SBA would have been the way for this guy to go. I think he would have been approved and especially with the structure we had, I was okay with it. So I would assume that he could have gotten a loan, but I didn't at that time. I didn't see the need and to pursue that because I felt
Mhm.
confident with the way the business was. So yeah, so that would be probably the first step was explore other options first versus
Mhm.
going straight to owner financing because you're doing a guy a favor that's been with you for 14 years.
Right. So in hindsight, do you think that's like you should have make sure that you're taken care of and then marry it to a structure that the buyer, or in this case, your chef, could have handled. So versus you start,
Yeah.
it sounds like you started with, okay, how can I make this work for this guy? But then
Yes.
really take care of your needs versus, hey, let me take care of my needs, and then we'll
Yes.
find a structure that works.
Yes. I looked at his needs first, then mine second. Yes. And I should not have done that.
And I think that happens a lot. I see this. What you're saying is it kind of happens a lot with family businesses where the parents are running the business, so the first generation or second generation run the business. They're not really doing a great job pulling money out or saving and reinvesting for retirement. So all their money's stuck in the business. They want to hand it to their kids, but they need to have an event to get some money out so they can retire, or they'll do the what we call the retirement in place, or the annuity, where they're not going to work anymore, but the kids got to pay them their salary.
Hmm.
But what then happens is the business kind of goes sideways or something happens.
Yeah.
And by that time, everyone realizes that the business is not producing what it should have been. It's not creating enough cash to basically support the children's lifestyle or living expenses, and to pay for the retirement plan for the parents.
Yep.
So yours is, you didn't have the exact example, but it sounds very similar, because we see that a lot, and I know we're going to move into what you're doing now. I'm pretty sure that comes up a lot with some of the clients and people.
Oh, yes. Yeah. When I work with clients, especially when they say, "Oh, I'm going to turn my business over to my son or daughter," I'm like, "Well, let me tell you a story." I have something to share.
So you have these experiences now, and you've been working, and I'm drawing a blank on how long you've been doing the work with Focal Point and as a CEPA. How long have you been with Focal Point?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So
Yeah.
you have this experience running your own business, going through two different um, exits, neither one that was met your expectations, particularly in hindsight. Now, know what you now know. You've gone through this training. Let's talk about now, how do you approach the market? How do you talk to your prospects and your clients? Like, what are the things that you try to lay out for them to help make sure that they do it the right way and they protect themselves going forward?
I usually, what I seek out are owner dependent businesses. That's kind of my sweet spot because I lived that life
Can
early
you
on.
explain owner dependent business a little bit further, what that means?
Yeah. So everything evolved around me. Nothing happened I didn't know about. No big decisions were made without me making them. Everybody else was a doer. I was pointing, I was directing traffic. I was there double checking their work and make sure that they did it correctly. I never left the business. I mean, there was lots of times I was working 90 to 100-hour work weeks. So that, it was draining. And when you work like that, you become numb, like physically and mentally numb. Now the buzzword is brain fog, right?
Mhm.
Back then, I didn't know that was a thing, but that's what I had.
Mhm.
And knowing that feeling and how much negative impact that it had on my personal life, it's not, I would never, I didn't know how not to do it. So I go seeking for those businesses. When I'm talking to business owners, that's what I'm listening for. Is this business owner dependent? Because it's not only, even if they're making money, they're not living a good life. It's not a lifestyle that anybody needs to operate in. So, and it also has less value. Nobody wants to buy that job. Nobody wants to work 100 hours. So those are the people that the vast majority of my clients now, that's the world they're in, and they don't want to be there. How did I get out of it?
So when you're outsourcing or looking for clients, or I know you do public speaking, I know you do roundtables with other advisors to educate the market. Um, what are the things that you hear or that people should listen to what are the things that you hear that says, okay, this is an independent business, they need help, that would help trigger people to say, hey, wait a second, I'm falling into this trap. Let me seek advice, or let me figure out how to change this direction before it's too late. So what are the triggers, the things that you hear and say, okay, this is someone we should talk to because they are too owner dependent?
Well, first I ask them how many hours a week they work. That's, how much do you work? How much time do you spend in your business? So that's one thing that I'll just directly ask that question. there's other things that I'll ask to draw out the answer. And one of those is, what kind of vacation did you take last year?
Why is that
Depending,
important?
well, so the one, it tells me if they're taking any personal time off or not, and who they're spending it with, right? How much is it with family or not? Then, depending on what they do on that vacation, tells me about how much money they're spending, which gives me an idea how much play money or excessive cash or how they're budgeting for that kind of time. So it gives me some insight as to
Mhm.
what they're willing to spend to enjoy life, right? So the vacation is a soft question that people always are comfortable answering, that gives a lot of insight.
And
Yeah.
what are some of the answers that you hear that then triggers you to say, okay, we need to dig a little bit deeper to see how we can help these people out?
Yeah, funny you should ask. I had a meeting with a client yesterday. I asked that question. She does like window coverings or something like that. And she said, "Oh gosh, I think it's been 6 or 7 years since we've taken a vacation. We just don't have time for that."
When they say they don't have time, what does that trigger for you?
So, well, why don't you have time? Yeah. So I then start. My wife says I'm the oldest 5-year-old she knows. I'm asking these questions. Like, why are you not taking time off? So we're just too busy. And I don't let that answer just fall right there. Tell me more. Tell me about what are you spending your time doing? Describe an average week for me. And when they start describing their work week, a lot of times they really can't. I just, it becomes this mind jumble, and they're trying to say this jumble that's upstairs because they are so doing so much busy work and just reacting to their
Mhm.
job that they can't even clearly tell you what all they did last week. And
Yeah.
that's when I have that conversation.
How do you help them change that cycle where they, and
It's
what are some of the root causes of that create that problem?
so there's two things I usually do. One is, let's set some time aside and let's walk through. Tell me about Monday. Let's have another meeting if you want to, or we can have this meeting right now. But if we can't unpack last week and go through the steps of what you did, then the first question I'll ask is, well, did you plan your week that way? So I get an insight. Are they even planning, or are they completely reacting? So that gives me an idea of their time management. It tells me about, are they setting goals? Are they setting priorities? Are they doing these things that successful business people do? Are they even doing that? And if they can't answer any of those questions, then that's when I'll introduce them to, some basic business technique and business skills.
So I'm going to summarize and tell me if I'm on track here. So if they can't take vacation and they're overwhelmed and they're too busy, the way you've approached it is like if they are reacting and they don't have a plan, it tells you that okay, they're just living for the moment. They
Yeah,
don't have either they don't have a team or they don't have a process, correct?
right.
And if you don't have a team or don't have a process, it's almost impossible to leave for a vacation because who do you delegate the work to, and what does the foundation rely on to make sure the work gets done when you're not there? Is that a fair assessment of how you
Yeah.
look at it?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other questions I'll ask them, I said, well, if you do take time off, and it could be just an afternoon, because obviously you're probably going to go to the doctor or the dentist or something,
Right.
you're going to leave the business for something. When you come back, what kind of punishment do you endure? They're like, what do you mean? I was
How you
like,
phrase
well,
that.
yeah, I mean, but you're going to come back to a firestorm, right? You're going to put some fires out. Oh yeah, all the time. It's like, okay, well, tell me about that. If you go on vacation, you're coming back to vacation punishment. Oh yeah, Alan, how'd you know that? I'm like, well, I'll give you two guesses, right? So it's what fires are, because when you're owner dependent, when you're running the business and everything evolves around you, what happens is you're training the employees that they're going to be directed, and you're
Mhm.
building a culture of people that are going to sit around and wait on you to tell them what to do. So when you leave, nobody's telling them what to do.
So what are some of the first, so you've diagnosed this, they said, okay, I want to engage with you, Alan. I want to start to fix these things. I want to be able to take vacation. I want to be able to rely on my team. I want to feel like I'm not reacting every single day and that I'm following a plan and we're making progress to whatever our plan is. What are some of the first steps you do to change the direction?
Usually the first question I ask, assuming that I'm talking to a man, is I'll say, can I meet your wife? Because I want to ask her what life is like when you're working like this. And they never want to introduce me to their wife. I said, because that person, if there's somebody else in your life that you're close to, they're the ones that are concerned about your well-being, and that's going to give some insight. So I always try to connect something emotional, something personal.
Mhm.
What do your kids say about when do you miss any soccer games? And what's that
Mhm.
conversation like because you're working so much and you miss that soccer game? Do you want that to continue? Do you think your kids or wives or your husband want to see that continue?
Mhm.
And if even if you don't seem concerned, do they? And if y'all want this life to continue or you want it to change, that's where I come in. And that usually does it right there.
So then once you're in,
Yes.
so, like when you say, okay, we're gonna, and I know I'm gonna, because I've done what you're doing right now, and it's not a quick fix. You got to
Mm-mm.
change your mindset, you got to change the culture, you got to change your thought processes. But what's the first 8 weeks like? What do you lay out? It's like, okay, here's the things we want to start to do differently. Here's how I want you to start. What are the type of things you start working with clients? Okay, we can change this. It takes one step and then it takes a second step. But what are those steps that you put in place to start changing their mindset of how they run their business and the things that they're doing to run their business?
Yeah. So whether they're saying, Alan, I want to sell it in 2 or 3 or 5 years, or I want this lifestyle, I don't want to sell it. I just want things to be better and I want it to be more valuable. Is the first thing we do is we talk about the end game. What do you want this business to look like at the end of whatever line that we're looking at? Let's
Mhm.
create the vision of what your life is like and what the business life is like. Paint that picture, and now we're going to walk backwards to today, and then that's how we come up with a plan. We have to identify the goal line. What are we trying to cross here? What's it look like? And clearly define it. And I don't define it. I ask them. I make them do it. And if we need to bring spouses in to help with that vision, then I've done that. That usually
How-
doesn't go the way they want it to.
So for you, the most important thing is to figure out that defined target and goal. Um, how long does that take to get them to start thinking about that and to get comfortable setting a goal?
Most of the time it doesn't take very long for them to sometimes they've had this vision, they just haven't verbalized it or they haven't written it down. In their mind, they've created this goal line. They know real quick on what they don't want, right? So sometimes it's about identifying what you don't want to help you identify what you really do want. But I'd say within 30 to 45 minutes of a focused conversation on that, you can kind of get a pretty good picture of where we're going to go, what the end is going to look like. The hard part is stepping back into it, but identifying the vision pretty quick.
How often do you hear where there is a plan or quasi plan, but they're the only people that know it? No one else, either the succession, the people that need to be involved in the succession on doesn't know. The people that they're going to need to help finance it or to help put some infrastructure in place don't know the plan. The family members who are not in the business don't know the plan. How often do you know that they kind of have an idea what they want, but no one that's going to be a key constituent or a key stakeholder in the plan knows about it?
Yeah, when I find it, the size of the business doesn't seem to be a factor. It's a lot of times they look at selling a business much like selling a house.
Hmm.
I'm going to go and find somebody to list it for me. I'm going to put it on the market and we're going to work this deal out in 30 to 60 days. I'm going to have this thing sold and I'm out of here. And as you know, and I know, it is a much more detailed process than that. So helping them understand that, and most of the time I have to get their trusted advisor that knows about the exit process, or at least is familiar with the exit process. They need to hear it from more than just me. They need to hear it from multiple sources. And once I get them to where that happens, whether it's through Zoom or in person, helping that message come from people that they already know and trust, that's when it starts to hit that maybe this thing is a little bit harder to tackle than I first thought. So other advisors singing the same tune is where that's when the clarity around this process starts to hit for them.
What other advisors do you typically collaborate with to help these business owners through this process?
So one of the questions that I'll ask is, who do you trust most? Sometimes it's a financial planner. Sometimes it's an accountant. It could be an attorney, but not that often. But there's somebody that they trust talking finances and future and all that. I find out who that person is. And I say, all right, let's get a meeting with all of us together so that we're on the same page. And once that happens, that's how it works. But it's usually either a financial planner or an attorney is the two. There's also, well, I take that back, financial planner or a CPA. Sometimes there's an attorney, or it could be an attorney that they know. It may not be necessarily their attorney. They may not necessarily have a quote attorney, but they know one that they trust, and they'll bring that person in. Yeah.
You mentioned this early on, or I mentioned it, but we didn't dig deep into it. You are a certified exit planning advisor.
Yes. Which
creates a framework of how you work through this exit planning process. Can you just give an overview of what the tools are that you use, or the framework that you use to go through that exit planning process?
Yeah, so when you go through the certification process, they educate you on all of the players that are involved in the exit process, and they educate you on the steps of the process. When I first started with the qualification, it's like this wide paintbrush, and sometimes you need a trim brush to get things done. And for the certification, everybody that has that accreditation or that credential, they are all educated on the entire process, all the players, and all the steps that are needed in order to successfully exit the business and to gather the wealth, get the wealth out of the business that you can, right? So it's identifying that gap. For me, and for some certified exit planning advisors, there's a narrow focus that I work in, which is owner dependency. That is one of the key things. There's 4 capitals when it comes to business value, and human capital, structural capital. So there's these things so that's the one area that I focus in on to create value. So certified exit planning advisor is there's valuation people, which is what I am. There's transactional people, which are the attorneys, the CPAs, the M&A advisors. Each player comes into the piece as to how this exit takes place. And the ones that have the CEPA credential understand all of the players and what part they all play. So they can be the quarterback of the whole operation, but they can't do everything. They're not a CPA, they can't do that part. They're not an attorney, they can't do that part, but they know the parts and who's supposed to do them and how they're supposed to be executed. So they can be that trusted advisor in the exit planning process.
Great. Well, thanks, Alan. This has been really informative. I knew that you'd be very informative because I've had conversations with you in the past about this, and we've collaborated on stuff before. And as some of you probably can tell from his accent, he's not from Boston like I am.
South Boston.
Tell them where you're from and how they can get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you afterwards.
Yeah, I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, born and raised in Arkansas. And if you're looking for me, you can just go through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Alan Bennett. I'm the only Alan Bennett in Arkansas. And it'll say CEPA, CEPA after my name, with Focal Point Coaching. So you can either go to Alan Bennett, focalpointcoaching.com, or you can find me through LinkedIn, are probably the best two places to find me. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being a guest for us today.
Yeah.
And welcome. Thank you, everybody, for watching our inaugural DeSimone Deals, the Exit Planning Strategy, the Exit Strategy podcast. We're here to help educate business owners on how to have better and more productive and valuable transitions and exits out of their business. So thanks for your time, and look forward to more. Please be on the lookout for future podcasts coming out on various topics, on various issues on this topic. Thanks, Alan.